Get your filthy hands off that car!
Get your filthy hands off that car. The words cut through the warm afternoon air like a knife. They echoed down the tree-lined street in Georgetown, bouncing off brownstone buildings where senators and CEOs lived behind iron gates and perfect lawns. Dr. Marcus Williams stood perfectly still beside his black Mercedes, his hand frozen on the door handle. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His silk tie caught the sunlight. His Italian leather shoes gleamed, and none of it mattered. Because Officer Daniel Cooper was already crossing the street, his hand resting on his belt, his face twisted with something between disgust and satisfaction. "I said step away from the vehicle, now!" Marcus turned slowly. He'd been through this before. Not exactly this, but versions of it. Enough times that his body knew what to do, even while his mind screamed that this was wrong, that this was his car, that this was his neighborhood, that he belonged here. "Officer," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady, calm, the way his father had taught him, the way his grandfather had learned during a different era, but with the same rules. "I own this vehicle. I live 3 blocks from here." Cooper laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind of laugh that's meant to humiliate. "Sure you do, and I'm the mayor. Hands on the car. Now." Have you ever watched someone's entire world change in a single moment? Have you ever seen dignity stripped away on a public street while strangers pulled out their phones, recording everything, helping nothing? What happened next? It shattered everything you think you know about power, about justice, about who really controls the streets we walk on every day. Because the man in handcuffs? He wasn't just anyone. And the officer who put them on? He had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Let me take you back. 6 hours earlier, before everything fell apart. Marcus Williams woke up at 5:30 in the morning, the same time he'd been waking up for 23 years. His alarm didn't even finish its first beat before his hand shot out to silence it. Old habits. He lay there for a moment in the dark, listening to his wife Elena breathing softly beside him. Their bedroom was simple despite their success. Family photos on the dresser, his FBI badge and credentials sitting in their leather case on the nightstand, right where he left them every single night. You see, Marcus Williams wasn't just Dr. Marcus Williams. He was Director Marcus Williams, as in the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the top law enforcement official in the entire country. But at 5:30 in the morning, he was just a man making coffee in his kitchen, scrolling through news alerts on his tablet, trying not to wake up his family before he had to. The news anchor's voice drifted from the small TV on the counter. Federal officials continue pushing for nationwide police reform initiatives, including mandatory body cameras and enhanced oversight programs. Marcus listened, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He knew more about those initiatives than any reporter ever would. He'd written most of them himself, drafted them late at night in his office, reviewing case after case of police misconduct, looking for patterns, trying to build systems that would prevent the very thing that was about to happen to him in just a few hours. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't about to become so brutally real. Across town, in a precinct locker room that smelled like stale coffee and old sweat, Officer Daniel Cooper was already complaining. "More federal oversight garbage," he muttered, slamming his locker door hard enough to make the whole row shake. His partner, Officer Sarah Chen, glanced up from tying her boots but said nothing. She'd learned that arguing with Cooper was pointless. "These Washington desk jockeys," Cooper continued, his voice getting louder, performing for the other officers getting ready for their shifts. "They don't know real police work. Probably never even been in the field. Sitting in their fancy offices, making rules for those of us who actually keep these streets safe." His locker was covered with photos, arrests mostly, almost all of them young black men in handcuffs, looking at the camera with expressions ranging from anger to exhaustion, to that particular kind of defeat that comes from knowing the system isn't built for you. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody ever mentioned it. There was a file sitting on the bench beside Cooper's locker. His personnel file. It was thick. Thicker than it should have been for a 7-year veteran. Inside were complaint after complaint. Excessive force, racial profiling, evidence irregularities, 7 formal investigations in 5 years. And somehow, mysteriously, every single one had disappeared. Stalled out, lost in bureaucratic limbo. Cooper had connections. He knew how to work the system. He knew which supervisors to buddy up to, which union reps to buy drinks for, which internal affairs investigators could be persuaded to look the other way. He felt untouchable. Isn't it strange how confidence and ignorance can look exactly the same? At FBI headquarters, Marcus sat in his corner office reviewing briefings. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across walls covered with commendations and awards. 23 years of service. 3 different presidents had personally thanked him for his work, but he kept the nameplates on his desk turned away from the door. He'd learned early in his career that showing too much too soon made people uncomfortable. Better to let them see the credentials after they'd already decided what they thought about you. His secretary knocked softly. "Director, your 6 o'clock community meeting is confirmed. The venue is downtown on Maple Street." Marcus nodded, closing the file in front of him. The tab read, Metropolitan Police Reform Initiative, Phase 2. Inside were statistics that would make your stomach turn. Arrest disparities so stark they couldn't be explained by crime rates alone. Complaint patterns that revealed systematic targeting of specific neighborhoods. Evidence of misconduct that went all the way up the chain of command. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "Don't work too late. Amanda's school concert is tomorrow and she's already nervous." Marcus smiled, typing back. "Leaving at 5:30 sharp. Wouldn't miss it for the world." He had no idea that in a few hours he wouldn't be going anywhere except a holding cell. Cooper spent his afternoon doing what he always did. Cruising through neighborhoods looking for what he called situations. His dashboard camera captured everything, but Cooper had learned long ago that footage rarely got reviewed. Internal Affairs was overwhelmed, understaffed, drowning in complaints they didn't have resources to investigate properly. He felt invisible. Invincible. By 4 p.m., he'd already pulled over 3 cars, all of them driven by black professionals. All of them released without tickets, but not before Cooper had made them stand on the sidewalk while he searched for weapons. Made them answer humiliating questions. Made them prove they belonged in their own neighborhoods. Each stop took 30-40 minutes. Long enough that crowds would gather. Long enough that everyone would see who was really in charge. His radio crackled. "All units. Federal officials are conducting surprise inspections of body camera compliance. Ensure all equipment is functioning properly." Cooper cursed under his breath. He'd been forgetting to activate his camera for months. But today, reluctantly, he switched it on. That camera was about to capture everything. Marcus left headquarters at exactly 5:30, just like he'd promised. He took his personal car, the Mercedes that Elena had surprised him with for his 50th birthday last year. No government sedan today, no driver, no security detail. Just a man going to a community meeting where he'd been invited to speak about police reform. The irony still would have been funny. He was scheduled to talk anonymously, identified only as senior federal official. He'd been doing these listening tours for months, quietly, hearing directly from communities about their experiences with law enforcement. Tonight's topic, building trust between federal and local police. He pulled onto Maple Street at 5:45, 15 minutes early like always. Old military habits. He straightened his tie in the rearview mirror, grabbed his briefcase, and stepped out of the car. The late afternoon sun felt warm on his face. A few people walked past on the sidewalk. Someone was walking a golden retriever. A young couple sat on their front steps drinking iced coffee. It was a perfect moment. It was about to shatter completely. From across the street, Cooper's patrol car rolled to a stop. The officer's eyes locked onto Marcus immediately. Expensive car, Black man. Confident posture. Everything that triggered something dark and ugly in Cooper's mind. He didn't see a man. He saw a problem. He didn't see a professional. He saw a criminal. He didn't see a neighbor. He saw someone who didn't belong. Cooper had no idea, absolutely no idea, that he was about to confront the most powerful law enforcement official in the entire country. And Marcus had no idea that all his theories about police reform, all his carefully crafted policies, all his years of working to fix a broken system, they were about to become brutally, humiliatingly personal. Two men, one street, one moment that would change everything. Get your filthy hands off that car! The shout made several pedestrians jump. Marcus turned slowly, his face showing nothing, even though his heart had already started that familiar hammering. He'd been through versions of this his whole life, growing up in Atlanta, in college, even after he'd become an FBI agent. Success didn't make you immune. It just made the injustice more absurd. "Officer," Marcus said carefully, "good evening. Is there a problem?" Cooper was already crossing the street, moving fast, his body language aggressive. Theatrical. He was performing for the growing audience. "Don't play stupid with me," Cooper snarled, and then, without warning, without any legal justification, he shoved Marcus hard against the car. The impact echoed down the street. Marcus's briefcase fell, papers scattering across the sidewalk. People stopped walking. A woman gasped. Someone pulled out their phone. "Hands on the vehicle, now!" Marcus complied. He had to. Because that's what you do when a man with a gun and a badge is treating you like a criminal. You comply, you stay calm, you survive. "Officer, this is my vehicle. I can show you the registration." Cooper laughed. That terrible, mocking laugh that was meant to humiliate. "Your vehicle? Right. Let me guess. You're a doctor, a lawyer, maybe a senator?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You people always have the best stories." You people. Marcus felt those words like a physical blow, but his voice stayed steady. "I work for the federal government." "Federal government?" Cooper howled with laughter, roughly patting Marcus down, his hands invasive, aggressive, meant to degrade. "What are you, a janitor at the post office? Don't try to impress me with your fancy words, boy." Boy, before we continue, if this story is making you feel something, anger, hope, maybe both, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now, because what happens next? It's going to completely change how you see justice in America. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories that expose hard truths but end with real change, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Now let's continue. By now, a crowd had gathered. 12, 15 people. Phones came out. Videos started recording. Every angle capturing the humiliation unfolding on a public street. Marcus saw the cameras and felt relief and horror in equal measure. Evidence was being created, but his dignity was being destroyed in real time, broadcast to strangers, preserved forever. Cooper yanked Marcus's wallet from his jacket pocket with theatrical roughness. "Dr. Marcus E. Williams," he read aloud mockingly. "Oh, doctor, what kind of fake degree did you buy online?" He held the license up to the light, performing for his audience. Address says Fairfax County. Real fancy neighborhood. No way someone like you lives there legitimately. The crowd was getting restless. Someone called out, "This is excessive." An elderly man shook his head in disgust, but Cooper fed off it. He puffed out his chest, turned Marcus around to face the crowd like a trophy. "You people think you can waltz into nice neighborhoods, steal expensive cars, and nobody will notice? Well, I notice. I notice everything." Officer Chen arrived then, Cooper's partner pulling up in a second patrol car. She stepped out and immediately sensed something was wrong. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him. The expensive tailored suit, the quality watch catching the sunlight, the calm, measured way he was handling the situation. This wasn't how car thieves acted. "What's the situation, Dan?" Chen asked quietly. "Caught this one trying to steal this Mercedes," Cooper announced proudly. "Probably got the keys from some rich lady's purse. These people are getting bold." Chen frowned. Something about the man seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Officer." Marcus addressed Chen directly, maintaining eye contact, his voice carrying unmistakable authority despite his circumstances. "I'm requesting your supervisor respond to this scene. This situation is escalating unnecessarily." "Shut up," Cooper barked, forcing Marcus's hands behind his back more roughly than necessary. Nobody called for backup opinions. He began searching the vehicle, tossing papers onto the street with deliberate carelessness. Marcus's briefcase tumbled from the passenger seat, falling open. Federal documents scattered across the pavement. Chen stepped closer, her eyes widening as she read the letterhead. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Office of the Director, Classified." "Dan," Chen whispered urgently, grabbing her partner's arm. "Dan, maybe we should slow down here. Maybe we should call a supervisor." "Maybe we should what?" Cooper interrupted, not looking up from his search. "Let him go because he's wearing a nice suit? That's exactly what's wrong with police today. No backbone." Marcus's phone started buzzing insistently in his pocket. The caller ID visible through the fabric read, "Deputy Director Chen, urgent." Officer Chen saw it and felt her stomach drop. "Officer Cooper," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength, "I'm strongly advising you to step back and reassess the situation. Contact your supervisor immediately. This is not going to end the way you think." "Advising me?" Cooper's voice rose to a shout. "You're about to be in handcuffs, Einstein. You don't advise anybody." He leaned close to Marcus's ear, speaking just loud enough for the cameras to pick up every word. "Know your place, boy. This is my world, not yours. My streets, my rules." The crowd was larger now, 20, 30 people, their expressions shifting from curiosity to outrage. Someone shouted, "This is wrong." Another voice, "Leave that man alone." A teenager with her phone held high yelled, "This is going viral, officer." Cooper fed off it like oxygen. He returned to searching the car, his movements becoming more destructive, more theatrical. And then he found what he'd been looking for. Or rather, what he'd brought with him. From his utility belt, Cooper palmed a small plastic baggie containing white powder. With movements he'd practiced dozens of times before, he slipped it under the driver's seat during his search. "Well, well, well," he announced triumphantly, holding the baggie high like a trophy. "What do we have here? Cocaine, felony possession with intent to distribute." Marcus turned to face him directly, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "Officer, that substance is not mine, and you know exactly where it came from." Cooper smirked, waving the evidence at the crowd. "Right, they never is theirs. Cocaine just magically appears in cars, right? Just falls from the sky into luxury vehicles." He addressed the crowd mockingly. "This is going to be a real good arrest. Career criminal caught red-handed." Chen stepped forward, deeply uncomfortable. "Dan, maybe we should test that substance before we make any charges." "Test it?" Cooper laughed. "What's to test? Drugs are drugs." Marcus looked directly into the nearest camera phone, his voice clear and authoritative despite everything. "I want everyone here to remember exactly what they're witnessing. Document everything you see. Record every word. Truth has a way of revealing itself, and when it does, there will be consequences." "Truth," Cooper spat. "The truth is you're a drug dealer who thought his fancy car would protect him." "Well, guess what, Professor? Not in my precinct, not on my watch." He reached for his handcuffs, and Marcus's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID was clearly visible to everyone nearby. FBI Deputy Director, Emergency Call Officer, Chen's face went completely white. The pieces were falling into place. She'd seen this man before, in federal briefings, in official photographs, standing next to the Attorney General. "Oh, God. Dan," she whispered desperately, grabbing his arm. "Dan, I think we need to stop right now." "We need to arrest this drug dealer," Cooper interrupted confidently. "Game over, fancy boy. Welcome to the real world." The handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire street. Cooper practically strutted as he guided his prisoner toward the patrol car, savoring every moment. "Watch your head," Cooper said with mock politeness, shoving Marcus into the back seat harder than necessary. The door slammed. Marcus sat quietly in the back seat, his dignity somehow still intact. Through the window, he could see the crowd still recording. He nodded slightly toward the cameras. Their documentation would prove crucial. Chen climbed into the passenger seat, her hands shaking. "Dan, I really think we should call a supervisor." "What doesn't feel right?" Cooper interrupted, pulling away from the curb. "Is that you're questioning a textbook arrest? Stolen vehicle? Drug possession? It's Christmas morning, Sarah." "He wasn't resisting arrest," Chen said quietly. "He was arguing with me. That's resisting." In the back seat, Marcus remained silent, but his mind was working. His phone had stopped buzzing, which meant his staff would be implementing emergency protocols within minutes. Deputy Director Chen would have already initiated a location trace. At the precinct, word was already spreading in whispers. Desk Sergeant Williams had taken one look at Marcus during booking and recognized him immediately. His face had gone white. "Martinez," Williams quietly called to another officer. "Get me the watch commander, now." Cooper strutted through the precinct doors like a hero, pulling Marcus along roughly. "Got ourselves a real prize tonight, boys. Car thief with a drug habit and a fancy vocabulary." Marcus maintained his composure as they processed him. When asked for his occupation, he stated simply, "Federal law enforcement." Cooper laughed loudly enough for the entire booking area to hear. Federal law enforcement? Probably a security guard at the Social Security office. During fingerprinting, Marcus requested his phone call. Cooper grinned maliciously. "Sure thing, doctor. Call your dealer." Marcus dialed a number from memory. When someone answered, his words were quiet but precise. "This is Director Williams. I'm currently in custody at the 5th Precinct. Implement Protocol 7 immediately." Protocol 7. Federal code for an emergency involving high-ranking law enforcement officials. The desk sergeant nearly choked on his coffee. Cooper snatched the phone away. "Time's up, hotshot." As Marcus was led to holding, other detainees looked up in surprise. The man in the expensive suit didn't belong here. "What are you in for?" one asked. Marcus replied quietly, "A misunderstanding that's about to become very expensive for some people." Outside the precinct, black SUVs with government plates were already arriving. Watch Commander Peterson was in his office when his phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and absolutely terrifying. "Commander, this is Deputy Director Chen, FBI. We believe you have Director Marcus Williams in custody. I need to speak with whoever authorized his arrest immediately." Peterson's face drained of color. "Did you say Director Williams? FBI Director Williams?" "That's correct, Commander. And I suggest you handle this situation very, very carefully from this point forward." Peterson's hands shook as he hung up. He immediately pulled Cooper's arrest report. His horror grew with every line he read. Meanwhile, Cooper was celebrating in the break room with other officers, completely oblivious. "Took down a real smooth operator tonight," he bragged. "Thought his fancy suit would save him. But justice is colorblind, boys." His radio crackled. "Officer Cooper, report to the watch commander immediately." Cooper grinned, straightening his uniform. "Probably wants to congratulate me." Biggest arrest of the month, guaranteed. Chen followed reluctantly, her stomach in knots. As they walked toward Peterson's office, neither officer noticed the group of federal agents entering the building, their badges gleaming, their expressions deadly serious. The stage was set. The hunter was about to meet the hunted, and justice, delayed but not denied, was finally about to reveal itself. Watch Commander Peterson stood behind his desk, his face ashen. The federal agents flanking him looked like they could cut steel with their stares. Deputy Director Chen, no relation to Officer Chen, stepped forward. Her voice was ice cold. "Commander Peterson, I need Officer Cooper and his partner brought in here immediately." Peterson pressed his intercom with a trembling finger. "Cooper and Chen to my office, now." Cooper swaggered down the hallway, still riding high on his perceived triumph. "Bet the commander wants the full story," he told his partner with a cocky grin. "Wait till he hears about the cocaine I found." They knocked and entered Peterson's office. Cooper's confidence evaporated instantly. The room was full of federal agents in dark suits. Their expressions ranged from disgusted to murderous. "Officer Cooper," Peterson's voice cracked slightly. "Do you want to tell me exactly who you arrested tonight?" "Some car thief," Cooper replied, but his voice had lost its bravado. "Called himself a doctor. Classic criminal behavior." Deputy Director Chen stepped forward, her FBI badge gleaming. "Officer Cooper, let me introduce myself. I'm Deputy Director Sarah Chen, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The man you arrested tonight is my boss, FBI Director Marcus Williams, the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the United States." The words hit Cooper like a freight train. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Officer Chen closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "That's impossible," Cooper stammered. "He was stealing a car. I found drugs." "You found drugs that you planted," Agent Morrison interrupted, stepping forward with a tablet. "We've reviewed everything. Your body camera, Officer Chen's camera, and 17 civilian cell phone videos. We watched you palm the baggie from your belt and slip it under the seat." Cooper's legs gave out. He grabbed a chair for support. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know." Deputy Director Chen's voice rose with controlled rage. "You saw a successful black man in an expensive car, and your prejudice did all the thinking for you." Peterson found his voice. "Officer Cooper, you're suspended immediately. Badge and weapon. Now." With shaking hands, Cooper removed his badge. It had never felt so heavy. His service weapon followed with a dull thud. "Where is Director Williams?" Chen demanded. "Holding cell 3, Peterson whispered. "Get him, now. Remove those handcuffs with a formal apology." Footsteps echoed in the hallway moments later. Marcus appeared, the handcuffs being removed by a deeply embarrassed sergeant. "Director Williams," Deputy Director Chen approached him with obvious relief. "Sir, are you injured?" "I'm fine, Sarah," Marcus replied quietly. "But we have work to do." He turned to face Cooper, who couldn't meet his eyes. The room fell completely silent. "Officer Cooper," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Look at me." Cooper slowly raised his head. "Do you understand what happened here tonight? You didn't just arrest an innocent man. You exposed a systematic problem. Your actions tonight have given us a case study in everything that's wrong with policing." "Director, I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus replied. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with dignity. You shouldn't need to see my badge to follow proper procedures. Every assumption you made was based on the color of my skin." Cooper's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What happens now?" "Federal civil rights investigation," Chen answered. "Criminal charges for evidence tampering, false arrest, violation of civil rights under color of law." And that's just the beginning. Marcus straightened his tie. What happens now is that we use this incident to create real change. Commander, I want every arrest Cooper has made in the past 3 years reviewed by federal investigators. If there's a pattern, we're going to expose it. The transformation was complete. The victim had revealed himself as the judge. The hunter had become the hunted. And justice, though delayed, was finally beginning to unfold. 3 days later, the FBI field office hummed with activity. Agent Morrison pulled up files on multiple monitors while forensic specialists examined the planted evidence. Director, preliminary analysis is complete, Morrison reported. The substance Officer Cooper planted was powdered sugar mixed with baking soda. Street value, about 50 cents. Federal charges he'll face? 25 years to life. Marcus nodded, reviewing body camera footage. 17 different angles showing Cooper's evidence planting, his racist language, his complete disregard for procedure. What about his arrest history? That's where it gets disturbing, sir. Morrison pulled up database records. Cooper has made 47 arrests in 7 years. 89 of them were black males between ages 18 and 55. That's 87.3% in a district that's only 29% black population. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, meaning he was systematically targeting. Exactly. And here's the smoking gun. 91% of his drug possession charges were later dismissed due to lack of evidence or procedural issues. Each statistic represented a life disrupted, a family torn apart, a career destroyed. Deputy Director Chen entered with a thick file. Sir, victim testimonies are pouring in. Word spread about Cooper's arrest and people are coming forward. The stories are heartbreaking. She opened the file. Dr. James Thompson, cardiovascular surgeon, arrested for suspicious behavior outside his own hospital after a 16-hour surgery. Spent the night in jail, missed 3 scheduled operations. Marcus examined the photo. A distinguished black man in his 40s, still wearing scrubs in his mugshot. Professor Kevin Washington, economics professor at Georgetown, pulled over 19 times in 2 years driving to campus. All charges dismissed. His students started a petition demanding security escorts. How many confirmed victims? Documented and verified, 81 individuals. We're expecting that number to triple. Chen pulled out another section. Attorney David Miller handcuffed in front of his twin 7-year-old daughters. The girls are still in therapy 8 months later. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of systematic injustice. Schedule the recorded interview with Cooper. I want to conduct it personally. Sir, is that advisable? You're the primary victim? That's exactly why I need to do it, Sarah. The victims in his other cases never got to confront their abuser directly. Someone needs to speak for them. 3 days later, Marcus sat across from Cooper in a sterile interview room. The former officer looked like he'd aged 20 years. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his hands shaking as he signed waiver forms. His uniform had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. State your full name and former occupation for the record, Marcus began. Daniel James Cooper, former police officer, 5th Precinct. Mr. Cooper, do you understand why you're here? Because I arrested you without knowing who you were. Marcus leaned forward. No. You're here because you systematically violated civil rights over a period of years. My federal position is completely irrelevant. You would have done the same thing to a janitor, a teacher, a student. Isn't that correct? Silence stretched uncomfortably long. Let me rephrase. How many innocent black men have you arrested under fabricated circumstances? I don't know what you mean. Marcus opened a thick folder methodically. Marcus Johnson, age 34, arrested for drug possession outside his own law office at 7 p.m. Charges dropped when security footage showed no suspicious activity. Kevin Davis, age 28, Arrested for car theft while loading groceries into his own vehicle. Vehicle registration confirmed his ownership. Charges dropped. Should I continue, Mr. Cooper? Cooper's composure began cracking. Look, I made some mistakes, but I was trying to do my job. Based on what evidence? Marcus interrupted. Based on what probable cause beyond the color of their skin? People like you coming into neighborhoods where they don't belong. Cooper started, then stopped, realizing his mistake. People like me, Marcus repeated quietly. Please finish that sentence. Silence. You meant black people. You saw my skin color and made every assumption that followed. My education, my character, my right to exist in that neighborhood. My right to be treated with basic human dignity. Marcus pulled out crime scene photos of the planted evidence. Explain this baggie to me. I found it in your car. Mr. Cooper, we have 17 camera angles showing you palm this substance from your belt and place it under my seat. We have forensic evidence proving it's household baking soda. We have your fingerprints on the baggie, but no traces of the substance anywhere else in my vehicle. Do you want to reconsider your answer? Cooper stared at the table, shoulders slumping. How many other times? How many other innocent people did you frame? I never meant to hurt innocent people. That's not what I asked. I asked for a number. Finally, Cooper whispered, sometimes evidence gets overlooked during initial searches. Sometimes you find things on a second look. That's not answering my question. How many innocent people did you knowingly frame with planted evidence? Cooper's voice became barely audible. Maybe a few times when I knew someone was guilty but couldn't prove it. Marcus felt cold fury building, but his voice remained controlled. You appointed yourself judge and jury. You decided who was guilty based on personal prejudice and then manufactured evidence. The interview continued for 3 more hours. Marcus methodically walked through case after case, extracting admissions that painted a picture of systematic misconduct spanning 7 years and affecting dozens of families. When it finally concluded, Marcus stood and straightened his jacket. Mr. Cooper, your actions didn't just harm individual victims. You systematically undermined public trust in law enforcement and violated the oath you swore to uphold. The federal government will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. As Marcus reached the door, Cooper called out desperately, What if I cooperate? What if I help identify other officers engaged in similar practices? Marcus turned back slowly. Cooperation might influence sentencing recommendations. But understand this. Your cooperation doesn't erase the lives you've damaged or the trust you've destroyed. Justice delayed is still justice. It's just finally caught up with you. Outside, Deputy Director Chen was waiting. Sir, the investigation has expanded. We're now looking at 16 other officers with similar patterns. Internal affairs files show systematic dismissal of complaints. What's the community response? Overwhelmingly positive from affected communities. Civil rights organizations are calling this a watershed moment. Even some police unions are acknowledging the need for reform after reviewing the video evidence. Marcus nodded grimly. This investigation can't be about punishment alone, Sarah. It has to be about systematic reform. I want comprehensive policy recommendations on my desk within the week. Already in development, sir. And Director, Officer Chen from that night, has requested a meeting. She wants to discuss how similar situations could be prevented. Marcus smiled slightly, his first genuine smile since the arrest. Schedule it immediately. If we're going to fix this system, we need officers who are willing to be part of the solution. Justice was in motion, with federal authority behind it. 6 months later, the federal courthouse was packed as Judge Patricia Williams prepared to deliver Cooper's sentence. The former officer sat at the defendant's table, a broken man who had pleaded guilty to 18 federal felony charges. Mr. Cooper, Judge Williams began, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive pattern of abuse of power. Your actions represent everything wrong with policing in America. Marcus sat in the front row, surrounded by dozens of Cooper's victims. Dr. Thompson, the surgeon. Professor Washington. Attorney Miller holding photographs of his twin daughters, now 9 years old. The evidence presented reveals a systematic campaign of racial profiling and evidence fabrication affecting at least 81 documented victims over 7 years. You didn't just break the law, you perverted it. Cooper's defense attorney had argued for leniency, citing his client's cooperation that had exposed 16 other officers and led to overturning 312 wrongful convictions. But the prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence of systematic misconduct. Before sentencing, Judge Williams said, "I want to address the broader implications. When Director Williams was arrested, he could have used his federal authority to make this disappear. Instead, he chose to expose systematic injustice." Marcus had testified extensively. His calm, methodical presentation had provided stark contrast to Cooper's earlier arrogance. The courtroom recordings had become required viewing in police academies nationwide. The federal investigation triggered by this incident, the judge continued, has resulted in reform across 23 police departments, mandatory bias training for 6,800 officers, and enhanced civilian oversight in 18 major cities. The reforms had been swift. Marcus had worked with Congress to pass the Federal Police Accountability Act, requiring body cameras, creating national databases of police misconduct, and establishing federal oversight of departments with patterns of civil rights violations. Officer Chen, the partner who had tried to stop Cooper, had been promoted to training supervisor. She was now leading bias recognition programs across the region. Her testimony about trying to intervene had become a cornerstone of reformed police training. "Mr. Cooper," Judge Williams addressed the defendant directly, "you will serve 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will pay $523,000 in restitution to documented victims, and you are permanently barred from any law enforcement position." Gasps of satisfaction rippled through the courtroom. Marcus remained stoic, but he felt a deep sense of completion. Additionally, the judge continued, "This court is ordering the creation of the Williams Commission on Police Reform to be chaired by Director Williams with a mandate to develop national standards for police conduct and civilian oversight." After the sentencing, Marcus addressed reporters and community members outside the courthouse. The stone steps were packed with people, cameras, microphones thrust toward him. "Today's sentence sends a clear message that systematic abuse of power will not be tolerated in American law enforcement," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But punishment alone is insufficient. Real change requires institutional reform, cultural transformation, and unwavering commitment to constitutional principles." The statistics spoke to the impact. Complaints against police had dropped 64% in districts implementing Marcus's reforms. Use of force incidents had declined by 48%. Most importantly, community trust in law enforcement was slowly beginning to rebuild. Dr. Thompson approached Marcus after the press conference, extending his hand. "Director, I wanted to thank you personally. My daughters can now see police officers without fear. That's worth more than any settlement check." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Dr. Thompson, your courage in coming forward made this possible. Justice belongs to all of us, not just those with federal badges." The Cooper case had become a watershed moment, proof that the system could correct itself when individuals had the courage to demand accountability. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. 1 year later, Marcus returned to the exact spot where Officer Cooper had humiliated and arrested him. The Georgetown street looked the same, but everything had changed. A small memorial plaque now marked the location. In recognition of all victims of police misconduct and the ongoing fight for justice and equality. The community center across the street buzzed with activity as Marcus arrived for the first annual Police Accountability Summit. Inside, a diverse crowd of police chiefs, Community leaders, civil rights activists, and reformed officers gathered. Captain Chen, formerly Officer Chen, greeted Marcus at the entrance. Director, body camera compliance is at 99% nationwide. Use of force incidents are down 56% from last year. And recruit training now includes 60 hours of bias recognition and constitutional rights education. Marcus smiled genuinely. How's the community response? Mixed, but steadily improving. Trust takes time to rebuild, but we're seeing positive engagement in neighborhoods that hadn't cooperated with police in years. Inside the summit, Marcus addressed an audience that included many of Cooper's former victims, now transformed into advocates for reform. Dr. Thompson had established a foundation providing legal aid to police misconduct victims. Professor Washington was developing curriculum for police cultural competency training. Attorney Miller's daughters, now 10 years old, had written letters to police academies nationwide about treating everyone with dignity. Systematic change doesn't happen overnight, Marcus told the packed auditorium. It requires constant vigilance, continuous education, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional bias. The statistics displayed behind him told a story of genuine progress. 1,089 wrongful convictions overturned, 18.7 million in victim compensation. Distributed 23 police departments reformed, 57 officers prosecuted for systematic misconduct. Cooper remained in federal prison, serving his 12-year sentence. Recent reports indicated he was participating in rehabilitation programs and had written letters of apology to his victims, though many remained skeptical of his sincerity. The most important lesson from that night, Marcus continued, isn't that the system worked perfectly. It's that it worked eventually when good people demanded accountability and refused to accept injustice as inevitable. He paused, looking out at the faces before him. Faces of every color, every background, united by a common belief in justice. Real change happens when ordinary citizens refuse to be silent witnesses to injustice. When you see misconduct, document it. When you witness bias, challenge it. When systems fail, demand reform. The audience stood in sustained applause. Community leaders embraced federal agents. Reformed officers shared stories with civil rights activists. Victims found strength in collective action. Outside, Marcus paused at the memorial plaque one final time. A young black boy, maybe 8 years old, was reading the inscription with his mother. The boy looked up at Marcus and smiled, without fear, without suspicion. Something that might not have been possible before the reforms took hold. The mother recognized Marcus. Her eyes widened slightly and she mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight and the worth of everything that had happened. As he walked to his car, the same Mercedes that had sparked everything, his phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Amanda. "Saw your speech online, Dad. Proud of you for turning something terrible into something meaningful. Love you." That evening, Marcus sat in his home office, the same place where he drafted those initial reform policies years ago. The policies that Cooper had complained about. The policies that had ultimately captured Cooper's own misconduct on camera. He was drafting recommendations for the next phase of police reform. The work was far from over. It would never really be over. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a constant journey that required vigilance, courage, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But the foundation had been laid. Systematic change was replacing systematic oppression, and victims finally had a voice in a system that had silenced them for too long. Let me leave you with this thought. Marcus Williams didn't choose what happened to him that day. He didn't choose to be humiliated on a public street, handcuffed like a criminal, thrown in a holding cell for a crime he didn't commit. But he chose what he did with it. He could have made it disappear. One phone call from the back of that patrol car and Officer Cooper would have quietly vanished, transferred, retired early. The whole incident buried under bureaucratic paperwork. Instead, Marcus chose to expose it, to use his pain, his humiliation, his experience as a catalyst for change. Because he understood something profound. His federal badge had protected him eventually. But what about all those people without badges, without power, without voices that anyone would listen to? What about Dr. Thompson, missing surgeries because of a bogus arrest? What about Professor Washington, pulled over 19 times for the crime of driving while black? What about Attorney Miller's daughters, traumatized by watching their father handcuffed in front of them? Those people deserved justice too. Marcus understood that his experience, as painful as it was, had given him something invaluable. Evidence, documentation. 17 camera angles capturing systematic injustice in real time. And he used it. Not for revenge, not for personal satisfaction, but to change a broken system that had been destroying lives for generations. Here's what haunts me about this story. How many times did Officer Cooper do this before? How many lives did he ruin before he finally made the mistake of targeting someone with the power to fight back? 81 documented victims. 81 families torn apart. 81 people who tried to report misconduct and were ignored, who filed complaints that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Who knew they'd been wronged but had no power to prove it? Until one day Cooper arrested the wrong person. The right person, actually. The one person who could finally expose him. But think about all the systems that had to fail for Cooper to operate freely for 7 years. All the complaints that were dismissed. All the internal affairs investigations that mysteriously stalled. All the supervisors who looked the other way. All the fellow officers who saw what he was doing and said nothing. Systematic injustice doesn't happen because of one bad officer. It happens because entire systems protect bad officers. Enable them, encourage them even. Marcus understood that. That's why his reforms focused not just on punishing Cooper, but on fixing the systems that had allowed Cooper to thrive. Body cameras that couldn't be forgotten. Civilian oversight that couldn't be ignored. Federal databases that tracked patterns of misconduct. Enhanced training that confronted bias head-on. These weren't just policies. They were shields protecting the vulnerable. They were voices for the voiceless. You know what's amazing? Marcus could have been bitter, angry, resentful. He'd spent his entire career fighting for justice. 23 years of service. 3 presidents had personally thanked him for his work. He dedicated his life to law enforcement. And yet, when it mattered, when he was on the wrong end of police misconduct, all his credentials meant nothing. His badge meant nothing. His decades of service meant nothing, because Officer Cooper couldn't see past the color of his skin. That's a betrayal that cuts deep. A betrayal by the very system he'd devoted his life to serving. But Marcus didn't let it destroy him. He didn't let it make him cynical or hopeless. Instead, he used it as fuel. Motivation. Proof that his reforms weren't just theoretical exercises. They were desperately needed interventions in a system that was failing people every single day. I think about that young boy at the memorial plaque, the 8-year-old reading about justice and equality, looking up at Marcus and smiling without fear. That's what justice looks like when it finally arrives. Not just punishment for wrongdoers, not just compensation for victims, but a fundamental shift in how we see each other, treat each other, protect each other. That boy grows up in a different world than his parents did. Not a perfect world. We're far from perfect. But a world where systematic abuse is harder to hide, where misconduct is more likely to be documented, investigated, prosecuted, where officers like Captain Chen get promoted for trying to do the right thing, even when it means standing up to a partner. Where victims like Dr. Thompson and Professor Washington become advocates, using their pain to prevent others from suffering the same injustice. That's the ripple effect of courage. One man refusing to let injustice be swept under the rug. One moment of choosing truth over comfort. One decision to fight not just for himself, but for everyone who came before him and everyone who would come after. So here's my question for you. Have you ever witnessed misconduct and stayed silent? Have you seen injustice and assumed someone else would act? Have you told yourself that one person can't make a difference, that the system is too big, too broken, too resistant to change? Marcus Williams proves that's not true. He was one person, with one experience, one moment of injustice captured on 17 cameras, and he changed the entire landscape of American policing. Not single-handedly, he had allies, supporters, fellow reformers who believed in the same mission. But it started with one person refusing to accept injustice. One person choosing courage over comfort. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Your willingness to speak up, document injustice, demand accountability, it all matters. Because justice isn't something that just happens, it's something we create. Together, through courage, persistence, and the fundamental belief that every person deserves to be treated with dignity. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about speaking up for justice, I want you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button. Let the algorithm know that stories about accountability and reform matter, that people care about systematic change. Second, subscribe to this channel, because we're going to keep telling stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about courage in the face of injustice, about systems that can change when good people demand it. Third, and most importantly, share this video. Share it with someone who needs to understand that change is possible. Share it with someone who's witnessed injustice and wondered if speaking up would matter. Share it with someone who's lost faith in the system and needs to be reminded that reform is achievable. Leave a comment below about your own experiences. Have you witnessed misconduct? Have you spoken up or stayed silent? What would you do in Marcus Williams' situation? Let's start a conversation, because that's how change begins. Not with politicians or policies, but with ordinary people talking to each other, sharing stories, demanding better. Remember this: democracy and justice only work when citizens actively participate in protecting them. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Your courage matters. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Until next time, keep fighting for justice. Keep speaking truth to power. Keep believing that one person can make a difference. Because as Marcus Williams proved, sometimes one person is all it takes.